On today's Locked On Giants podcast, we're talking Giants draft prospects and strategies with Nick Falato. That's coming your way next on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Today's episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, credentialed member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for Giants Country over on the Fan Nation Network. And a special welcome on into my everydayers, my Blue Crew community members, my newcomers, and everybody in between. You're all appreciated and loved. Thank you so much for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. And if you are watching on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel, click that little notification bell, and like the video. It helps us tremendously. And on today's Locked On Giants podcast, I am so happy to have this guest on with me. He's one of my favorites. You know I love him. You love him too. He is Nick Falato, Big Blue Banter. He contributes to Giants Country, where he's doing all the draft prospect picks, scouting profiles. He's over on Big Blue View. Just a tremendous football talent. Why he hasn't been snapped up by a bigger network, but I'm not complaining because that means I won't be able to get him. But Nick, so good to see you, my friend.
Pat, thank you so much for having me. I love doing this pre-draft podcast with you every year. I mean, we're deep into it right now. I mean, we have what is it? 3.5 weeks until the draft's starting to get really exciting.
Yeah, it'll be here before you know it. It's almost like, a holiday morning. You wake up and you see what kind of gifts you got, whether it's your birthday and whatnot. And so, yeah, it's very, very exciting. And Nick, we got to dive into a lot here because there is a lot to talk about for the Giants. It's interesting for as deep as this quarterback class is, and we'll start there. There doesn't seem to be a consensus regarding the top guys. I mean, you have a Caleb Williams, but then there are questions about Drake Maye. There are questions about J.J. McCarthy. Jaden Daniels is considered a top prospect. Michael Penix has been mentioned as a top prospect. Can you kind of sort it out for us who the top prospects are and then who would be the best fits for the New York Giants and in what rounds?
So let's start at the top. Caleb Williams, I think we can remove him. He is my number one overall quarterback right now. Chicago Bears. I mean, Keenan Allen's at the Guy's pro day. Like, he's going to be a Chicago Bear. So if we remove Caleb Williams, you're looking at Drake Maye, you're looking at J.J. McCarthy, and then you're looking at Jaden Daniels. And I would put that trio into their own category. And then maybe we could focus on Michael Penix Jr. out of Washington and Oregon's Bo Nix a little bit later. And I haven't gotten to Bo Nix's film yet. I'm almost done with Drake Maye's evaluation, so you can expect that soon. And I appreciate so much what Drake Maye and J.J. McCarthy do between the hashes and how they throw over the middle of the field. Now, one of my big things for quarterbacks is I want a quarterback who can target every inch of the field to force the defense to defend every inch of the field. Drake Maye has that ability. J.J. McCarthy, he'll target everything from the 20 to the line of scrimmage. His deep ball accuracy, I have some issues with. I say let's focus on J.J. McCarthy first. I just submitted his evaluation. It will get posted on the site shortly over there at Giants Country, I believe. So J.J. McCarthy, mobile, athletic, plays within structure very well. A wide base thrower who mechanically is very sound. I think he's stronger than he's given credit for. I think he's more creative as a thrower, specifically when he is on the run, than he is given credit for. I think he's better at that than a lot of people in the consensus community seem to want to give him credit for. I do not love J.J. McCarthy when it comes to targeting down the football field. I think there are some accuracy issues. I've seen him being dinged consensusly throwing to his left. A lot of people say, I got a problem throwing to his left. I understand where they're coming from, but then when you turn on the 2023 Purdue tape, you could see him making some deep throws to the left where you're like, okay, he can definitely still do that. I think it's probably a little bit more uncomfortable for him, but it's something he is capable of doing. I believe he is a player who doesn't have quite the ceiling of a Drake Maye, but he can come in. He's just turned 21 years old, so he can come into the NFL. And I think there is a lot of fundamental things that he has, not just from a mechanical standpoint, but also from he handled a pro style offense, setting protections, getting his guys aligned, pointing out blitzes, targeting the middle of the field. Everyone likes to point to that Ohio State play, Patty, the one where he earholed the linebacker and fit the football into the tightest of crevices. He did that several times throughout his tape. It wasn't just the Ohio State game. I charted 2 or 3 other times where it was very, very similar. And I really appreciate that. Another aspect of JJ McCarthy's tape that I'm a little bit hesitant to sit here and say, oh, this is going to translate well to the NFL. He's kind of a one-speed type of thrower. I think he has a really good fastball. There's a lot of zip on JJ McCarthy's fastball. He threw the football, I think, 61 miles per hour at the combine, and I think that was second fastest in this quarterback class. You could see that. But when you are targeting the middle of the field, something I do appreciate about him, as I've made clear, you need to put some trajectory on it sometimes. You need to have some touch to fit it over the linebacker between the safety. And that is an area of JJ McCarthy's game that I'm concerned with, because many of his interceptions this year, which there weren't that many, I don't have the stats in front of me, but he only threw single digits, like 5 or 6 interceptions this season. Like 3 of them were just to the underneath linebacker. If he just put a little bit more air underneath the football, a little bit more touch, a little bit more trajectory, that's an arm talent thing. If he was able to do that, then the football would not have been intercepted. And he threw, I think, 3 interceptions exactly like that. So there are some arm talent issues from JJ McCarthy, although he can rip a far hash from the college level, a far hash throw to the outside shoulder of a wide receiver running a comeback route. So can those things be fixed? Possibly, right? But the arm talent quite isn't there. And that doesn't mean arm strength. There's a difference between arm talent. And there's a difference between arm strength. Now, if we're going to get into arm talent for Drake Maye has arm talent when everything is working for Drake Maye. And again, not quite done with his evaluation. I've watched about 5 games of Drake Maye so far. And he is going to make 3 to 4 highlight level throws over the middle of the field, up the sideline, where you're going to be like, oh man, this guy is amazing. Mechanically, in the pocket, don't always know what he's doing with his front foot. He will make those amazing types of throws, throwing off his back foot sometimes, and then he'll just put the ball in the dirt at the flat, Patty. And you're just like, why is that? And it's not like that happened once or twice. It happens a lot on his tape, where he just seemingly cannot complete the easy layup gimme throws. And I think it all stems from a lack of consistency from his throwing motion, from him aligning his body to his target, and from his footwork. That needs to be cleaned up at the next level. Now you can look at the New York Giants. They have Brian Daboll, quarterback whisperer. Can he clean those things up? Possibly. But if you want to talk about the ceiling of Drake Maye, there is a high ceiling, because he has all of the arm talent that I think JJ McCarthy lacks, from an arm strength, from a trajectory, from a touch, from those types of standpoints. He does have accuracy when everything is clicking well for him. You'll see him make very accurate throws, but man, is it wildly inconsistent and very frustrating. And Drake Maye is also just very strong in the pocket, sturdy kid, takes some huge hits that I don't love, and that really manifested in the Minnesota game this year that I was just watching. I was like, man, you need to get down. That kind of transitions me to Jayden Daniels. Jayden Daniels takes some of the biggest hits I've ever seen a college quarterback take. Get down, guy. Just please get down. Jayden Daniels, very exciting. Breaks the pocket. It's people say Lamar Jackson. Look, that's easy comp to try to make. I don't necessarily see that. I think Lamar was a much better thrower of the football, and Lamar would target the middle of the field. That's another knock that I have on Jayden Daniels, is he doesn't necessarily target the middle of the field, or at least he didn't. Same with Michael Penix Jr. They don't target the middle of the field all that often with the offenses that they were in, the respective offenses that they were in. But I do like Jayden Daniels also mental processing, his ability to understand what's going on at the line of scrimmage, put his guys in the right place, seemed to have a really solid command of that offense. Now he had a really talented offense, same with Michael Penix Jr., with the receivers that each of those players had. But he's accurate with the football, I would say, at a more consistent rate than, let's say, a Drake Maye. It's just the arm is probably the worst of all of these quarterbacks that we're considering with Jayden Daniels. And he didn't necessarily seem natural throwing over the middle of the field. So those are some of my concerns. And I know I'm getting long-winded here. If you want me to just briefly talk about Michael Penix, I'm going to say my Bo Nix. I know Bo Nix was in college for 16 years, but I haven't seen enough of his all-22 to really have a clear thought on him. Michael Penix Jr., great NFL arm. Don't think he's as accurate on the deep ball as maybe some suggest, but still, when it's all clicking, the football gets to where it needs to be, and he can make throws every inch of the field. Doesn't necessarily target the middle of the field, though. But I appreciate the arm strength that Michael Penix Jr. has. Now, my one reservation, or one of my reservations, other than the injuries with Michael Penix Jr. and his age, would be how are you going to do under pressure? Because he wasn't really under pressure all that well at the NFL level. Now, I will say this, when he was under pressure, he found a good way to avoid the pressure and then either get rid of the football to where it wasn't a penalty or find an answer. I think he is a high processor as well. So it's a player that I don't 100% know where he's going to go in the draft, Michael Penix Jr. I think he could be a potential starter. I think how I labeled him was as a potential starter because of the arm strength and the arm talent that he has displayed. But you need to target the middle of the field a little bit more. You need to be able to handle pressure, because when he was under pressure, it wasn't as if I think his accuracy waned, is how I termed it in the report that I submitted to Giants Country. So I have some reservations there, but the arm is beautiful.
So the $1 million question, Nick, is which quarterback is the best fit for the Giants? And can they wait at 6 to get him? Do they have to trade up? Can they trade down? Can they wait till round 2? How do you see that playing out?
Part of me wants to say Drake Maye. I don't think it's as clean as other people make it sound because of all of those issues. But I think if you just pair him with Dable, there is a very high ceiling, and I want to roll the dice on that ceiling. Look, his 2023 tape, it's not great because the team around him was not all that great as well. But I think it goes beyond that, because even when he wasn't under pressure, Patty, you could see the footwork and things like that just were not resulting in what you want. Like if it's 1st and 10 and you have a wide open guy in the flat, you need to hit that guy. You can't. And if you miss it once or twice, okay. But if you do that like 5 times in a game, that's a big deal. Okay. I think I am willing, though, if the Giants are committed to Dable, which they should be, he's the head coach, to say, if one of those guys are available, just roll the dice, bring in the guy with the high ceiling, try to iron out all of his issues. And again, I still have a little bit more to watch. Try to iron out all of his issues, right, Patty? And have Daniel Jones and Drew Lock play this first year and see if he's ready when he develops a little bit more, because he's still a younger type of player. So that's where I think I'm at with the quarterback discussion. I'm not overly enthused about this quarterback class as I thought I was going to be, provided the idea that a lot of draft people discussed, when before I got into the tape back in like November and December.
Interesting. Now, let me ask you this, because this kind of segues into what I wanted to ask you next anyway. A lot of people, myself included, think that the Giants will go with a receiver at 6, that they will sit tight. They will be able to get one of those top receivers, whether it be Odunze, whether it be Neighbors, whether it be Marvin Harrison Jr. When you look at the value in terms of the grades, like your own evaluation, I know you've looked at those receivers. Is it better for the Giants to just sit tight at 6, given the needs that they still have to address, given the cost it would probably be to move up to get a quarterback? Just sit tight at 6, take a receiver, and then if you want to trade back into the first round later on, maybe look to do that when it's not as cost prohibited?
I don't really even know if I want the Giants to trade back into the first round. I'm imagining you're saying to get a quarterback.
Right.
Yeah. See, the Giants, they have a lot of holes on this roster. Now, if they're sold, like I have no access to Michael Penix Jr. I have no access to Bo Nix. There's a huge component of quarterback evaluation that people like me, they're never going to be able to cover. Like, it's not as comprehensive as I would like it to be, because I don't know how this person retains information. I don't know what exactly they were being asked to do at their respective colleges. So Brian Dable is certain that this player has what it takes to fit into his system, and it can grow and can potentially be a top 10 quarterback, top 12, maybe even top 15 quarterback in the league, and allows that allows the Giants to consistently compete for the playoffs, then yeah, I would be okay with trading up. Traditionally, though, I'm not. Now, for a quarterback, I would be okay with that. But traditionally, I don't necessarily want them to part ways with some of their draft assets in a deeper draft class, because the Giants have holes. The Giants have quite a bit of holes. But pertaining to your first question about the wide receivers, I don't think you can go wrong with Malik Neighbors and Rome Odunze, provided that they're both dialed in and ready to go. I've heard just people speculate that Neighbors has had some things in his past that might not be I think a gun charge. I don't know anything about that, right? Like, I have no idea. I'm sure the Giants will do their due diligence on that. But from a talent standpoint, what's happening on the football field, those are number one wide receivers. Patty, the Giants haven't had a number one wide receiver since Odell Beckham Jr. was traded. And they tried to find a solution with Darren Waller, and now he's still contemplating retirement right now as a tight end who is going to be a de facto wide receiver 1, or just a passing asset, number 1 type of weapon. So if you get Odunze and if you get Neighbors, I think that is going to significantly complement this 11 personnel package that would consist of a combination of Darius Slayton and Jalen Hyatt and then Wan'Dale Robinson as well. I think Odunze probably complements it better than Neighbors just because Odunze has a different type of skill set because he is that big physical true X, but he's not stiff. He's fluid. He's a good route runner. He can climb that proverbial ladder and just rip footballs away from cornerbacks. I think that's going to translate well. Whereas Neighbors is much more of that lightning rod. He is that, okay, I'm going to take a slant to the house, similar to an Odell Beckham Jr., not helmet scouting. Just from that specific perspective, you can see how both of those players have a similar skill set from an explosiveness and a burst type of standpoint. But if the Giants select one of those two players at 6, you're not going to hear any complaint from me because the Giants offense just acquired a player who is going to be their number one weapon that every defensive coordinator is going to be like, all right, we got to stop that guy. And guess what? The Giants just lost the player that was that for the last 5 years in Saquon Barkley, and they might lose another player who would have been that if Saquon Barkley was not dressed for certain games, and Darren Waller if he decides to not play, which he's still contemplating.
Right, which is why to me it makes sense. Go receiver at 6. Don't mess around, especially because you have needs, as you mentioned. And speaking of the needs, right after this, we'll talk about some of those needs and some prospects that can potentially fill those needs. So don't go anywhere. Hey, Giant fans, it's playoff time in the NBA and NHL. Baseball's in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon today and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's number one sportsbook. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, and I've got Nick Falato, a Big Blue Banter, amongst other stuff. He's also doing the draft prospect profiles over on Giants Country. You can also read him on Big Blue View. The guy knows his stuff, and I'm always, always happy to talk ball with Nick. He is tremendous. Follow him on Twitter. Please do yourself a favor. And Nick, let's talk about some of the needs. You mentioned the Giants still have a bunch of needs, even after all that they did in free agency. Let's talk about some of those needs and some of the value picks that maybe they could look towards to fill some of those needs.
Let's start, I guess, at the cornerback position. The Giants selected a first-round corner last year in Deonte Banks, and that is the only player now that I look at the cornerback position and says, I'm comfortable with that guy as a starter. Who else am I comfortable with as a starter? Cordell Flott, we hope that he can develop into that. He was a third-round pick in the previous season, but there's nothing that I've seen that suggests, yes, that's who I am comfortable with starting for the New York Giants. Then you have guys like Aaron Robinson, bringing in Jalen Mills, and there's really no one there that is dialing him into the roster, and that's going to be your starter. Trey Hawkins the third, right? So Darnay Holmes. So I look at the cornerback position, and I look at the second round pick that the Giants have. This is a deeper cornerback class. Would they be in a position to select a player like maybe Max Melton in the third round, or someone who may slip in the draft, like an Enos Rackstraw Jr. or DJ James, or even a Mike Sanistrell? That's Michigan, Mike Sanistrell, who's a little bit more of a slot guy. Are they going to be inclined to do that? I'm not 100% certain. So I think at the top of the cornerback draft, right, if the Giants end up trading down, let's say if Minnesota was like, you know what, we want JJ McCarthy, the Giants will give you 23 and 11 and next year's first, which would be amazing, or maybe other like day 2 picks. You can trade up, Giants will trade back. In that scenario, and then Odunze and Neighbors, you're passing up on that. It's huge opportunity cost, right? But in that scenario, would you want to entertain a Kenyon Mitchell if the Giants are at 11, or a Cooper DeJean from Iowa? I'm not 100% certain, but I look at the cornerback position in general, and I come away just saying, like, I think the Giants have to add somebody with one of those first 3 picks if the value obviously aligns. And there's a couple players that I name there. I still want to watch some of the depth pieces in this draft class that I still need to get eyes on. But overall, there are cornerbacks who I think the Giants must investigate if they want to have I don't even want to say proven because it's not proven, but somebody who has a similar ceiling to a Deonte Banks. And then now you have 2, hopefully, cornerstone cornerbacks to grow in this defense together.
What about some other needs? Like, to me, I would think interior defensive line, lining somebody up next to Dexter Lawrence might be a good idea. I would think a sneaky need is offensive tackle, a developmental offensive tackle. You might make a case that, if Waller does retire, and we still don't know as of this recording what his plan is, do you get another athletic tight end in here? Can you make a case for an inside linebacker, even somebody who can, play the run as well as be effective in coverage, like a Bobby Okereke? What do you see as far as those needs go, and who do you like for them?
I think safety is another position that you have to throw in there as well. But if we're going to focus on interior defensive line, there are a couple players like Maye Wingo from LSU who I like, who might be available in the third round, possibly even day 3, who is, I'm not sure why he's not getting discussed a little bit more, because he's flexible for a big guy. And he is the one gap penetrator that I think could fit well into Shane Bowen's system on passing downs to complement Dexter Lawrence. There's another player though I wanted to talk about, not just from the interior defensive line, because there's other interior defensive linemen that we can mention, like Braden Fisk, who probably played himself out of being there at pick 40 for the Giants with his or 47 with his excellent combine that he had. That's a Florida State kid. You got Chris Jenkins from Michigan, Rook, or I'm not even going to try to say his last name, the Clemson kid whose first name is Rook. He's another one who, big, powerful, strong hands, still a little bit raw. So there's a lot of developmental aspects to his game. But there is a player that the Giants have been linked to, and this kind of is more of a player that I don't think will be available for the Giants in the second round. He's going to be a first-round pick because he has such good pedigree coming out of high school. But the Giants have been linked to him, and that's Chop Robinson from Penn State. And I'm not sitting here saying, the Giants need to draft Chop Robinson. I see some flaws in his game, as you can read over at Giants Country with the evaluation I just submitted. But the idea of adding a Chop Robinson to this defense is what really stood out to me, because the Giants are poking around the Chop Robinson idea, right? So if they do trade down, maybe you get him at 23, whatnot. All right. Who did they add this offseason? They added Brian Burns. What is Brian Burns' skill set predicated on? Incredible burst, explosiveness, and ability to bend the edge. What does Shane Bowen like to do? Shane Bowen likes to align in passing situations when he was with the Tennessee Titans in wide 9 types of stances, meaning that the defensive end, the end man on the line of scrimmage on each side, are going to be significantly outside of what a 5 technique would align as. That's going to give an easier path for very explosive players into the pocket. It's going to really stress the offensive tackle, who has to cover ground with either a vertical set or just an aggressive 45-degree set to cut off that angle, because the angle is so long for that offensive tackle to cover. And I just think of the idea. Shane Bowen had Brian Burns, and then they added Chop Robinson in a 3rd and 6 situations, obvious passing situations. Both of those guys would immediately be some of the most explosive and bendiest pass rushers in the entire NFL on the same team in a system that would maximize that specific skill set. Now you put Kayvon Thibodeau and Dexter Lawrence on the inside as 3 techniques or 4-eye or whatever you want to do, and you have one of the best interior defensive linemen in Dexter Lawrence crushing the pocket with the other 2 screaming around the edge, and then Kayvon doing whatever he wants to do. And you have 3 players on the line of scrimmage who can all drop and operate in space, in coverage, which plays right into what Shane Bowen loves to do with his 4-man pressure packages, not just from twisting and slanting, which he also enjoys to do, but from a simulated pressure standpoint. Simulated pressure means you send 4 guys. One of those 4 guys is a non-traditional rusher, whether that be a defensive back or a linebacker. And you can disguise this well with a creeper type of method as well. So that idea really appeals to me. I think Chop Robinson is a little bit too expensive for that, but you also have a Javon Solomon from, I believe, Troy, who is going to be selected probably on day 3 because he does not have long arms, and he does actually have long arms, but he is drastically undersized. He's like 6 foot. Who wants a 6 foot edge rusher? But if you're looking for that specific skill set of explosiveness, not the Chop Robinson's level, but man, you watch Solomon and you're like, dude, this kid from Troy, Giant fans, we know about pass rushers from Troy. This kid from Troy can really bend the edge, and he has a quick first 3 steps, and he can bend through contact and underneath contact. That's the type of player that I look at, and I'm like, if I can get that guy on day 3, he could pose a specific problem that plays right into what our defensive coordinator is trying to do, and now you have a dangerous 4-man pass rush. So I wanted to bring Javon Solomon's name up because I think he's very interesting from that standpoint. I don't know if Joe Shane is going to look at his measurables and say, I don't know if I can add this guy, because you look at what Joe Shane and at least with Brandon Beane, what they were into. They were into guys with longer arms. They were into bigger 6'5" type of defensive linemen. That's not necessarily what Javon Solomon is, but I think he plays right into what Shane Bowen is wanting to do. You talked about tight end. The name that I used to, I don't want to say poo-poo because I knew he was good, and I want to get to an evaluation of him here shortly. Giants are picking at 6. You turn on some Brock Bowers tape, it's like, whoa, what am I watching here? Like, this guy is insane. So I haven't done the evaluation on him. I've just seen him on Saturday, and I've poo-pooed that in the past, but maybe I need to go back and watch a little bit more on him. I think like Cade Stover from Ohio State is another guy who that would be like a day 2 type of player. And I don't know if I'd want to invest a day 2 pick. And I don't want to really invest a day 1 pick, but if it is for a guy like Brock Bowers, who is insane, I at least want to do my due diligence and get a comprehensive evaluation on him to see if that's something that I would be interested in doing. So I wanted to bring his name up. And then the safety position. Look, I like Cole Bishop from Utah. I think he can handle a lot of different responsibilities. And that's what I want from my safety. The Shane Bowen system right now, Patty, is going to be a 2-read system, meaning it's going to be pattern match, which essentially is, it's zone, but it just turns into man coverage, right? The safeties are going to read the release of the number 2 wide receiver. If they go over the middle of the field, they'll adopt that player. But if another wide receiver ends up coming into their zone, they can pass it off. There's a lot of communication. It's a lot of processing that goes into that. Bishop fits into that mold, and he has man coverage skills. I think Dadrion Taylor Demerson is another player who also fits into that. Tyler Nubin is probably going to be selected, the Minnesota kid, a little bit too early. Jaden Hicks from Washington State. He's more of like a Jamal Adams physical type of, I don't want to say just box presence because it's lazy to do that, but I just saw some significant hip tightness in Jaden Hicks' game that gave me a little bit of pause. He covered the seam very well in man coverage on tight ends, but anything that was like crossing, he struggled with. But I think safety is just another one of those low key needs that the Giants might need to invest in. Mills, Pinnock, and Dane Belton, they could form like a solid trio, but I want to add another body into that can really help Shane Bowen with his personnel package, just give him a little bit more flexibility.
All right, Nick, let's talk about sleepers for this class. Who are some of the prospects that people are not talking enough about but need to be?
I think I mentioned some of them. I think Makai Wingo is one of the ones, the kid from LSU that I like. There's certainly wide receivers, but this is such a deep wide receiver class, Patty. Like, I like Malachi Corley, the Western Kentucky kid. A lot of people are saying, oh, he's like a Deebo Samuel. That's kind of an unfair comparison. But if you just get the football in the kid's hand, he's going to do a lot of damage. And I look at this new kickoff rule. I think at the end of the season, we're going to be like, yo, that kickoff rule changed stuff, because it's going to put a priority on players. Like, let's say if Kadarius Toney was dialed in, Kadarius Toney would have thrived with that kickoff rule if you wanted to put him there, because these guys are coming in from they're not going to have the momentum and the speed that they have. It's going to change alleys and angles on special teams. And it's going to force these special teams coordinators to get very creative and adapt. And I think Malachi Corley, I think players like that can be so dangerous now on special teams, and savvy NFL teams are going to recognize that and take advantage of that. But if we go just specifically on the wide receiver position too, man, I look at Roman Wilson and Ladd McConkey. Those are day 2 guys that I believe are just, precise route runners who don't necessarily have that number 1 type of vibe, but both kind of had an Amon-Ra St. Brown style to them, where I think operating between the hashes in the college football game is something that they absolutely thrived in. If I want to go down some more of my list to look at other sleepers, a running back sleeper I like is Audric Estime out of Notre Dame. I had him graded a lot higher than a lot of other people, and then he went to the combine and ran like a 4.71, and I was like, oh man, well, now he might fall. He still had really explosive testing, though, Patty. And Estime, when you watch his tape, it's like people just fall off of him because he's just like just a ball of muscle that is running. And these Notre Dame backs, they don't always test that well. They come into the NFL and they're just successful because they're they understand the nuance of running the football and reading defensive paths and reading the blocks that are in front of them. Kyron Williams is a great example of that. And now we see him absolutely killing it with the Los Angeles Rams. So if the Giants wanted to wait to day 3 to select a running back to complement Singletary, who is also different than Singletary, a little bit more bigger, a little bit thicker, I think Audric Estime from Notre Dame is certainly a player that fits that build. If I go to some of the other players, I think Chow Smith-Wade is the player from Washington State who the Giants had for a top 30 visit. When I went through his tape, he dealt with some injuries this last year. he has some man coverage upside. I've seen people suggest that he doesn't. Look, he has some man coverage upside, and he could be really pesky at the catch point. And I like that type of temperament, that type of mentality. For me, when it comes to these cornerbacks and these defensive backs, I just want a good baseline of athletic ability. And as long as you have that and you have good coaching, I think you can develop into a good player, right? Like I think with Jerome Henderson on staff still, and he's done this to other cornerbacks, and I'm hoping Cordell Flott actualizes this as well. You bring in a guy like Chow Smith-Wade, who has a baseline athletic ability, not quite to the level of Max Melton from Rutgers, who I really like, who if he's there at pick 70, and the Giants also had him in for a top 30 visit, or it might have just been a local day visit, so they didn't waste one of their top 30 visits. Either way, they have eyes on Max Melton, a local kid. Bo Melton, his brother, was drafted in the 7th round by the Packers, wide receiver last year, or by the Seahawks, and then he ended up going to the Packers. But regardless of that, Max Melton is another one of those players where I understand why people look at his tape like, dude, what are you talking about? He didn't maintain any positive relationship on this deep pass. And that's something that he has issues with. Still, man, the explosiveness. You have him play cover 2 trap. That guy goes downhill and it's just like instantaneous. His click and close. That's just his short area quickness is so impressive, even for an NFL type level athlete. So Max Melton is another one of those players that I appreciate. And I'm trying to think if I have any others here in my notes. I kind of already talked about a lot of the players that I do like. So I think we'll leave it at that. Or, one tight or 2 tight ends, actually. Just throw 2 tight ends. Ben Sinnott from Kansas State. He's going to be the type of player that a team selects him, and he just does everything like in a gritty, tough type of manner. He's not necessarily this overpowering type of blocker, but he's a try-hard guy. And he's also more athletic than he's given credit for, too. And I think he's certainly a player that if you want to use him at fullback, he can do that. He can be H-back. Maybe not want him to be a consistent Y, but he can operate functionally as a Y in certain situations just because of that toughness. But I love his natural receiving skills. And then Theo Johnson, I still did think there's so much meat on the bone of Theo Johnson. Now, he ended up going to the combine and killing it. I had a pretty damn high grade on him before the combine. I thought, this guy's going to test out of his mind. And he did test out of his mind, and I was happy about that. But the production wasn't necessarily there other than the touchdowns that he caught for Penn State this past season. But I think there's still more there for Theo Johnson. Not necessarily the most fluid in his lower half when he has the football from an agility standpoint, a little bit stiffness there. Straight line though, the kid is straight line. The kid could be dangerous as somebody to split these 2 high coverages that we see proliferating around the NFL.
Okay, Nick, I've got a couple more for you real quick. By the time draft weekend is over, what, besides obviously getting good players and the right players, but what do the Giants absolutely positively have to accomplish? No questions asked. If they don't, then, pack it in.
If they don't pack it in, I'm going to go with find a receiver, find that number 1 receiver. But again, if they trade out of that, then I'm not sure if you're going to get that. Now you can make the argument, is A.D. Mitchell a number 1 wide receiver that you could get if you did trade out of 6? Is Ricky Pearsall a 2nd round type of number 1 receiver? I'll definitely entertain those arguments. I loved Ricky Pearsall's tape. That's a Florida kid. A.D. Mitchell was Texas prior. He was at Georgia. But I do want to add somebody who can really round out this wide receiver core. But I'm really also inclined, Patty, to say, find another cornerback. Because if something happens to Deonte Banks, what are we looking at the cornerback position? What are we looking at? And I don't know. Okay. Like I think adding John Runyon and Jermaine Illuminor and Steiny and the other guy, that gave Joe Shane so much flexibility in this draft. You can select an offensive lineman if that offensive lineman falls to you, but you're not pigeonholed or forced to do so. And I think what Joe Shane has done so far with the little moves that he has made, bringing in the 2 tight ends, just in case Darren Waller retires, in Chris Manhertz and Jack Stoll, you add even a Jalen Mills, who he could play cornerback, he could play slot, he could play safety. He gives you some flexibility. It's not somebody you want to rely on, but now you're not desperate in the draft. So I really like what the Giants did to set, and even Drew Lock, what the Giants did to set themselves up in this draft. So there's not going to be desperation. So if to go back to your question, if I had to pick one, I think it would be find that number 1 wide receiver. And now you're going to have 4 wide receivers on your roster, 5, I guess you could even say, with Isaiah Hodgins, who can operate in 11 personnel, and you can rotate them depending on the matchup, depending on your game plan. Cause some of those wide receivers are better against man coverage. Some of the ones are better than against zone coverage, like an Isaiah Hodgins, for instance. So that's where I would go. And they're in prime position to make that selection at 6 if they want to stay put.
All right. Now I have to ask this isn't necessarily a draft related question, but a lot of people still seem to be of the opinion that Daniel Jones, once healthy, can be the guy that, last year was an aberration because of the offensive line, because he didn't have Saquon Barkley, because he didn't have this, because he didn't have that. I want to ask you your thoughts on where Daniel Jones is. Do you think at this point we have seen the best that he has to offer? Do you think that, the evaluation obviously has been cloudy because of the circumstances? And at what point do we say, okay, is enough with the injuries and the excuses that seem to be made year after year for him?
Yeah. So I haven't hid behind this at all. Look, I think the people who are Daniel Jones stands, they have a point that he hasn't had the best infrastructure around him. Of course he hasn't, right? They've recycled through coaching staffs. The offensive line has not been great, nor have they had a alpha wide receiver for Daniel Jones. But I watch the Giants games on the All-22 so much, right? Daniel Jones is a limited quarterback. He is. He doesn't target deep enough. I've said this so many times. The Giants were dead last in explosive plays in 2022. Dead last. They made the playoffs. They won a playoff game, and that was awesome. And it's a credit to Daniel Jones for taking to the system. It's a credit to Brian Daboll for getting the most out of Daniel Jones and leveraging his mobility. But a lot of that offense was bootlegs off of play action, relying on efficiency off of bootlegs and play action. And then one read, and if that read isn't there, Daniel Jones take the B gap if the edge rusher decides to take a high side rush. I don't think he's a terrible quarterback like other people seem to think. I think Daniel Jones is a quarterback that if he's on your rookie contract, you're like, okay, we have this guy for cheap. Let's see if we can win some football games. But now that you're paying him $40 million a year, he's not that guy. He's not. You need to be able to challenge defenses. Like I said earlier in the podcast, you need to be able to throw the football to every inch of the field. Daniel Jones does not target deep. He doesn't, and not consistently enough. And even if there could be small windows where you got to be instinctive and you got to be decisive and you got to let it rip. And Jones is a little bit hesitant in those areas. And this has been displayed throughout much of his career. So those are aspects of his game that it's like, can that be fixed? You hope so, right? But we're in year 6 now? And he's making the money of a second contract quarterback. That's tough. That's tough. And last year, look, everything fell apart for Daniel Jones. And I want to hear all the Daniel Jones stands. I want to hear all of their all the reasons why they still support him. But I think at the end of the day, he's still a limited guy. And I think that those people, the Daniel Jones stands, they have a point. Again, man, like you lost Andrew Thomas in the first series of the game. Like that's terrible. Saquon Barkley ended up getting injured in the second game of the season, and he missed a couple games. Darren Waller was in and out of the lineup. Josh Azudu was starting at left tackle. Like that was terrible. Like the Giants were in a much better position when they brought Justin Pugh straight off the couch to play left tackle for them. And it wasn't even supposed to play left tackle. He was supposed to play left guard. And the guy ended up playing left tackle like 15 plays into the game. It was an insane situation, especially for just the sheer fact, Patty, that the Giants have invested so much in the offensive line room, and they were still in that position. So I think there's definitely merit to that argument. But even when things are good, Daniel Jones is not targeting down the football field, and the defenses know that, and the defenses are playing him as such. And that is a huge problem and a huge hindrance to your offense. And I just think it's been borne out for quite a while, even though the infrastructure has been perfect around the kid.
That and also the injury history, of course, which is a big, because the neck especially would worry me. But Nick, always great stuff. I always appreciate you coming on and talking ball. I love talking ball with you. We will do this again, maybe as we get a little closer to the season.
Absolutely.
Listen, check out his work. He's doing draft profiles over on giantscountry.com. Actually, si.com/NFL/Giants.
Okay.
So check it out. And Giant fans, make sure you keep it here all week long here on the Locked On Giants podcast. We've got more guests coming for you. We've got Coach Keith Sanchez, who's one half of the Locked On NFL draft team. We've got Dane Brugler coming up on the program. So we've got so much more for you as we count down to the draft. For Nick Falato, I'm Patricia Traina. Thank you, Giant fans, for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. And we will see you again tomorrow.